I had just moved to a new city for a job and needed some furniture for my empty apartment. Being on a tight budget, I decided to check out Craigslist for some cheap or free stuff. I ended up finding a free couch that looked to be in decent shape from a guy named Tom. He said he was getting rid of it as part of a move. We arranged for me to come by his place that weekend to pick it up. When I got to Tom's house, something seemed a little off. He lived alone in a run-down-looking house in a sketchy part of town, but he seemed friendly enough when he welcomed me inside. The couch was in his basement, which was dimly lit and piled with boxes and junk. As we walked down the creaky stairs, I started to feel uneasy, but tried to shake it off. Tom and I carried the heavy couch up the stairs and loaded it into my car. As I was getting ready to leave, Tom asked if I wanted anything to drink for the road. At first, I declined, but he insisted, so I reluctantly agreed to some water. He went to the kitchen and came back with a plastic cup full of water. I drank it quickly and got out of there, happy to be done with the awkward encounter. Or so I thought. Later that night, I woke up dizzy and disoriented. My heart was racing and I was trembling all over. I felt feverish and nauseous. I realized something was very wrong, and these were not normal symptoms. The only thing I could think of was the water Tom gave me. Had he drugged me with something? Panicked thoughts raced through my foggy mind. I didn't want to go to the hospital and tried drinking lots of water to flush out my system. After an excruciating night, I started to feel a little better by morning. I skipped work and spent the day resting. When my coworkers called to check on me, I said I had the flu. What else could I tell them? That I got poisoned by a Craigslist stranger. Everything just seemed so surreal. As I laid low over the next few days, I became paranoid that Tom would try to contact or find me. My encounter with him had been so odd. The creepy house, the insistence on giving me water, his overly friendly manner. I realized I had no idea who this man really was. My fears were confirmed when I came home one night to find Tom sitting on my front steps. My blood ran cold and I considered bolting, but I didn't want him to know where I lived, so I cautiously approached him and demanded to know why he was here and how he found me. Tom gave me an icy stare and said he had seen my car in the neighborhood earlier in the week. He wanted to check on me and make sure I was enjoying the couch. When I told him I had gotten sick after drinking the water he gave me, he feigned concern, but his unsettling grin told me all I needed to know. I stood firm and told Tom he needed to leave and to never contact me again. He shrugged and walked away, humming an eerie tune as I watched him disappear into the night. The next few weeks, I oscillated between uneasiness and denial over what had happened. I threw out the tainted couch and considered moving or getting a new phone number, but I eventually convinced myself to move on, and that Tom was just a crazy, lonely person. But I was wrong. One night, I awoke to the sensation of someone stroking my hair. I jumped up in terror to see the shadowy outline of a man next to my bed. I turned on the light to reveal it was Tom, who must have gotten into my apartment somehow. He was clearly unstable and dangerous. I screamed at him to get out before I called the police. He just smiled oddly and said he missed me. I threatened him again in the strongest terms I could, saying he would go to jail if he didn't leave. Finally, Tom left after giving me a long, chilling look. I immediately had my locks changed and got a home security system installed. I realized he could have killed me that night if he wanted to. It's been months now without any sign of Tom, but I still constantly look over my shoulder when I'm out alone. His creepy smile is seared into my mind. I regret ever going to get that free couch from Craigslist. You never know who you're really dealing with or inviting into your life. My horror story is a warning to others. Be very careful in your encounters with strangers. Monsters hide in plain sight. I've always been one to try and save a buck wherever I can. Times are tough, and every little bit helps when you're struggling to make ends meet. That's why I often browse Craigslist for good deals on used items, cheap housing, and odd jobs. Usually it works out fine, but sometimes you encounter people who are not quite right. Let me tell you about one of those times. It started simply enough. I was looking for some part-time work to supplement my income. Scrolling through the gigs section, I came across an ad that caught my eye. Need helper for housework, $20 an hour cash. The pay was great, so I responded right away. The poster Jeff got back to me quickly and said I could come by that afternoon to discuss the job. He gave me an address in a neighborhood not far from mine. When I pulled up to the house, I immediately got weird vibes. It was quite run-down looking, with overgrown bushes and peeling paint, but I tried not to judge too quickly. Jeff greeted me at the door. He was probably in his 40s with greasy hair and stained clothing, but again, I didn't want to make assumptions. Jeff led me inside and began describing the job. He needed help deep cleaning the house, decluttering and organizing. As we walked through the dim, dusty rooms, he pointed out the piles of clothes, trash bags, and stacks of boxes. My wife left me and it's gotten out of control, he explained. I just need someone to help me set it all straight. I nodded along, though honestly the place seemed like way more than a two-person job. Jeff said he was willing to pay $25 an hour since the place was such a mess. That sounded great to me, so I agreed to come back the next day and get started. When I returned, I brought all my cleaning supplies and got right to work. The place was filthy, and clearly Jeff hadn't cleaned in months, maybe years. I tidied and dusted while he sat nearby just watching me. After a few hours, I told him I was going to start breaking down some of the boxes and piles. "No," he shouted suddenly, making me jump. Let me go through those first. Just leave them be. I caught a glimpse of what looked like women's jewelry and possibly wigs in one of the boxes. But hey, to each their own. I moved on to scrubbing floors and sanitizing the kitchen instead. After I'd worked up a sweat, I decided to take a quick water break. I headed to the kitchen and Jeff jumped up to join me. As I gulped my water, I noticed him just staring, his eyes wandering up and down my body. I started feeling really uneasy. "Looks like you're working hard," he said with a creepy grin. "Let me know if you need a massage or anything like that." "Okay." I forced a polite smile. "No thanks, I'm good." Well, back to it. I hurried away, his eyes following me as I rushed down the hall. The next few hours were painful. Jeff's leering gaze stayed glued to me as I awkwardly cleaned around him. Then he started finding excuses to get closer, offering to help me reach a high shelf or lift something heavy. Each time I declined as politely as I could. Later, as I was washing dishes, Jeff came up behind me unexpectedly. I jumped as he said quietly in my ear, "You missed a spot." I spun around to see him holding out a sponge, way too close for comfort. My heart raced as I took the sponge and turned back to the sink, willing him to move away. Mercifully, the end of the day soon approached. As I gathered my things, Jeff asked if I'd come back tomorrow. I hesitated. I really didn't want to come back, but I also needed the money. Plus, part of me wondered if I was just overreacting. "Sorry, but I don't think I'll be able to make it tomorrow," I said. "Maybe we can reschedule for some time next week." Jeff's expression darkened for a split second before he forced a smile. "No problem. Just let me know when you can come back." His tone seemed cheery, but his eyes told a different story. I had a feeling this wasn't over. The next 2 weeks were nerve-wracking. I kept noticing a dark-colored pickup truck parked just down the street from my apartment building. It had tinted windows so I couldn't see who was inside, but it just gave me the creeps. A few times I thought I noticed the truck driving slowly behind me as I ran errands, but I shrugged it off, figuring it was probably just paranoia left over from my strange encounter with Jeff. But one night, the paranoia became all too real. I woke with a start at 3 a.m. Someone was pounding on my front door. Half asleep, I made my way to the door. "Who is it?" I called out shakily. "It's Jeff, remember from Craigslist. Can you let me in?" My blood turned to ice. What was he doing here, in the middle of the night? I didn't answer, paralyzed by fear. "Come on, open up," he called out loudly. "I just want to talk." The doorknob rattled violently as he tried to force his way in. That was enough to jolt me into action. I rushed to grab my phone and dial 911 with trembling fingers. As soon as I blurted out my address, Jeff must have heard me. The pounding stopped and I saw him sprint away through the peephole. Within minutes, the police arrived. I told them the whole story and they said they'd search for Jeff, but he was long gone. An officer stayed with me while I packed a bag and went to crash at a friend's place. I wish I could say that was the end of my scary Craigslist encounters, but it wasn't, not by a long shot. That was just the first of many creepy folks I've come across while trying to save a few bucks. I've learned to be much more careful when dealing with strangers. But sometimes, even when you're cautious, things can take a disturbing turn you'd never expect. I don't know why I keep going back to Craigslist. I guess there's just something irresistible about the unpredictability of it. You never know what you might find or who you might meet. Sometimes it leads to amazing opportunities. Other times, not so much. My name's Jack, and let me tell you about the time a Craigslist encounter went horribly wrong. It started innocently enough. I was looking for some extra work to supplement my income. I strolled through the gigs section, nothing catching my eye until I saw an ad that read "Need help moving boxes. $20 an hour. Easy money," I thought. The ad didn't provide much detail, only an email to contact if interested. I shot over a quick email expressing my interest. Later that day, I received a reply from a man named Victor. He said he had over 50 heavy boxes that needed moving from his current apartment to a new one on the other side of town. He preferred to hire someone for this manual labor rather than ask friends, and was willing to pay $20 an hour cash. This all seemed normal, so we arranged to meet at his current apartment the following night at 7 p.m. He left his address and apartment number. The next evening, I parked my car along the street and walked up to a rundown-looking complex. The place was eerily quiet, with only a few windows lit up in the multi-story building. I found the unit number and hesitantly knocked on the door. A middle-aged, unkempt-looking man opened the door and introduced himself as Victor. He welcomed me inside, where I saw about 30 large boxes scattered around the living room. "I thought you said there were 50 boxes to move," I asked. Victor mumbled something about how not all the boxes were packed yet. He offered me a beer, which I declined. I wanted to remain sharp just in case anything felt off. We awkwardly stood around for a few minutes before I asked when he wanted to start loading up my car. "Oh, I was thinking we could move the boxes in my van," Victor replied casually. I was immediately alarmed that he never mentioned using his own vehicle. My mind raced with all the horrible true crime stories I'd heard about people being kidnapped or worse. I stayed calm on the outside and came up with an excuse to leave. "You know what? I just realized I have somewhere I need to be soon. I don't think this is going to work out. No hard feelings," I said, backing towards the door. Victor stared intensely at me with cold eyes and insisted I stay to help. He moved between me and the door as I loudly repeated that I had to leave immediately. Adrenaline pumping, I frantically eyed objects around the room I could use to defend myself if needed. Sensing my fear, Victor's demeanor shifted and he smiled awkwardly and stepped aside my apologies. "If I made you uncomfortable, I understand if you need to leave." I wasted no time pulling the door open, getting to my car, and speeding off. Relieved to be safe, I decided my Craigslist days were over. But soon boredom and curiosity pulled me back again. One Saturday afternoon, home alone browsing Craigslist's free section, I came across an intriguing listing: free cats to loving home. Purebred ragdolls. As a lifelong cat lover, I was intrigued by the idea of getting a purebred kitten for free. I emailed the contact asking if they were still available. Within minutes, a reply came through from a woman named Lucy. She said she still had multiple kittens left and invited me to come meet them that evening. She included her address on the outskirts of town. These felt like ideal circumstances to give Craigslist another shot, so I agreed to be there at 6 p.m. I pulled up to a small house on a large plot of land. It was an isolated area with no other houses in sight. Red flags started to go off in my head again. I hesitated, but eventually got out and walked up to the front door. As I raised my hand to knock, the door suddenly flew open. There stood a frail old woman with wild gray hair who introduced herself as Lucy. She welcomed me inside, where I was hit with an overpowering stench of what seemed like animal urine and feces. My eyes started watering as they adjusted to the dimly lit entryway. I followed Lucy through a dark hall into a living room filled from floor to ceiling with crates stacked on top of each other. Inside, cats of all ages cried out for attention. There had to be over 100 cats crammed into that small house. Realizing I had stumbled into a hoarding situation, I started planning another quick exit. But the old woman quickly shuffled over with a tiny gray ragdoll kitten in her hands. "Here he is, a perfect little gentleman." Despite the overwhelming smell and sights of neglect, I couldn't help but melt a bit at the sweet blue-eyed kitten being placed in my arms. In that moment, with the kitten warming up to me and purring loudly, I pushed aside my bad feelings. How could I leave this poor thing behind? Against my better judgment, I told Lucy I wanted him. "Excellent," she proclaimed. "We just need to complete some paperwork and he's all yours." She led me towards a back room to fill out forms. With each step, the stench grew worse, and I started to gag. She looked back and said, "Oh dear, sometimes the cats make a mess back here. Watch your step." As we entered the hallway, my stomach turned to knots. Was it my imagination, or were those dark stains on the floor more than just cat mess? Lucy continued on, muttering under her breath about how happy she was to find another cat a good home. Though my instincts told me to run, I followed her into the back room. I now wish I had listened. Sometimes my curiosity truly gets the best of me. I should have known better than to ignore all those red flags. Maybe if I had, I wouldn't be locked in this woman's basement right now, at the mercy of her twisted agenda for me and the other adopted cats. I'm still desperately looking for a way out. If someone is reading this, please send help. My Craigslist days are over, if I manage to make it out of here alive. I was looking for a cheap laptop on Craigslist when I saw an ad for a MacBook Pro for only $200. The seller claimed that it was in perfect condition and that he was moving out of town and needed to sell it fast. He also said that he could only meet me at his apartment in a sketchy part of the city. I was a bit suspicious, but I decided to take a chance and contacted him. He replied quickly and gave me his address and phone number. He said he was available anytime and that I should hurry before someone else snatched the deal. I drove to his place the next day, hoping to score a bargain. I called him when I arrived and he buzzed me in. He told me to go to the 3rd floor and knock on the door with a red star sticker. I followed his instructions and found the door. I knocked and waited. No answer. I knocked again, louder. Still no answer. I tried the doorknob and it was unlocked. I opened the door and stepped inside. The apartment was dark and smelled like rotten eggs. There was trash everywhere and piles of clothes on the floor. I saw a laptop on a table in the corner, but it looked nothing like a MacBook Pro. It was an old Dell with a cracked screen and missing keys. I felt a surge of anger and disappointment. I had been scammed. I turned around to leave, but before I could reach the door, I heard a loud click behind me. The door had locked itself. I panicked and tried to open it, but it was no use. I looked for a window, but there were none. I was trapped in a filthy room with no way out. I heard a voice from behind the door. It was the seller. "Hello, friend," he said in a mocking tone. "Did you like your laptop? It's a real bargain, don't you think? Who are you? What do you want?" I shouted. "I'm just a guy who likes to have fun," he said. "And you're my fun for today." He laughed maniacally and continued. "You see, I like to lure people into my apartment with fake ads and then lock them in. Then I watch them through a hidden camera and see how they react. It's very entertaining." I felt a chill run down my spine. He was a psychopath who enjoyed torturing people for his amusement. "What are you going to do to me?" I asked, hoping to buy some time. "Oh, nothing much," he said casually. "Just play some games with you. You like games, right?" He paused and then said, "Let's start with a simple one. There's a bomb under the table where the laptop is. It's set to go off in 10 minutes unless you can defuse it." He laughed again and said, "Good luck, friend. You'll need it." He hung up and left me alone with the bomb. I ran to the table and looked under it. There was indeed a bomb with wires and a timer attached to it. It showed 9:57, 9:56, 9:56, 9:55. I had no idea how to defuse a bomb. I didn't even know which wire to cut. I felt helpless and hopeless. I screamed for help, but no one heard me. I was doomed. I looked around the room, hoping to find something useful, but all I saw was garbage and junk. Then I noticed something on the wall. It was a poster of a movie called The Hurt Locker. It showed a man in a bomb suit holding a pair of wire cutters. Maybe it was a clue. Maybe it was a clue. Maybe the seller had left it there as a hint. I grabbed the poster and ripped it off the wall. There was nothing behind it except more trash. But then I saw something on the back of the poster. It was a message written in red ink. It said, "Cut the blue wire." I stared at the message, wondering if it was a trap. Maybe the seller was lying and cutting the blue wire would make the bomb explode. Maybe he wanted me to die in a fiery blast. But then I thought, what if he was telling the truth? What if cutting the blue wire was the only way to stop the bomb? What did I have to lose? I decided to take a chance and trust the message. I grabbed the wire cutters and cut the blue wire. Nothing happened. I looked at the timer. It showed 0, 3, 0, 2, 0, 2, 0, 1. I braced myself for the explosion, but it never came. The timer stopped at 0, 0, and the bomb was defused. I breathed a sigh of relief. I had survived. I heard a loud beep from the door. It unlocked itself and opened. I ran out of the room and down the stairs. I didn't care about the laptop or anything else. I just wanted to get out of there. I reached the ground floor and saw a police car outside. 2 officers were waiting for me. They told me that they had received an anonymous tip about a bomb threat in the building. They had traced the call to the seller's phone number and raided his apartment. They found him hiding in a closet, holding a remote control. He had been watching me through a camera and was ready to detonate the bomb if I cut the wrong wire or ran out of time. He was arrested and taken away. The officers asked me if I was okay and if I needed any medical attention. I told them that I was fine and that I just wanted to go home. They took my statement and let me go. I drove away from the scene, feeling lucky and grateful. I vowed never to buy anything from Craigslist again.